On April 27th, 2024, I was chasing a setup that had garnered a moderate risk with a 15 hatched tornado outline. However, my first tornado of the year did not come from within the moderate risk space. You can barely see a landspout tornado off just above the horizon, maybe 20 or more miles away. It was a landspout near Leoti, Kansas, and it was my first tornado of 2024. That setup was quite a lot more fun to chase the secondary target near the triple point up in Kansas than it was to go after the high-end risk in Oklahoma. However, with how prolific 2024 would end up being, it's safe to say that I went after a few high-end prolific setups. So how many tornadoes did I see? On April 8th, in central Texas, I saw a total solar eclipse. The time lapse right there shows you the shadow of the moon passing overhead. And if I had a better camera, some of my shots would have been a lot cooler. However, this dust devil, my good first vortex of the year, was so close that even with an iPhone, it was some pretty high quality footage. Now on May 1st, the beginning of a storm chaser's dream month, I got a 5% tornado risk in, well, a broad section of Kansas, but it ended up taking place near the southwest regions of the state. This fantastic, slow-moving supercell produced a weak but heavily rain-wrapped tornado that looked a lot more imposing because of all the rain and tumbleweeds flowing towards it. It was around this point that I decided to notch it up as a tornado. A weak one, not well defined, but you definitely would not want to be standing underneath it. As the sun began to set, I was able to see a couple more little tornadoes like this dusty, presumed landspout off in the distance, hiding away from the main region that tornadoes would be expected. However, this wedge blob, as Reed Timmer called it, was in the expected area of a tornado to be. So, went ahead and called that one another tornado. Right here. See that? Probably the most clearest, easily defined tornado of the day was this one that surprisingly took place in the dead of night. But thanks to all the dust that it was shooting up, it was easy to see a tornado. Another landspout. On May 4th, officially 1 year exactly after I caught my first tornado ever storm chasing in 2023, I was back on the chase in Texas, but this time a lot further away from where I was on the 4th the year prior. This one was just south of the border of New Mexico, in Kermit, Texas. And this supercell was a little bit detached away from where the rest of the main tornado-producing threat was expected to be. Now, a brief tornado was reported near the airport. Brief and dusty, not very long lasting, but evidently it was one that prompted an observed tornado warning. Now on May 6th, a severe weather setup would prompt the issuance of my first ever high risk. It was a 30% hatch tornado risk area that I would find myself in. And of course, I went to the Twist X Memorial to start the day. PDS tornado watch that issued that day, also being the first that I would ever be in. Now, the storms that we caught this day, from the start, quickly proved themselves to not be exactly what we were expecting. Not big, strong, absolutely monstrous updrafts. These were a lot more linear than we were really thinking that they would be. However, this one right here would actually go on to produce a fairly long tracked EF1, but me and Cameron, who I was chasing with that day, would backtrack away and get on one of the tail end Charlie storms. While on that storm, just trying to keep up with it, I saw this pop from near the rain-free base. Now, I'm not confident enough to call that one a tornado, but category of tornado possible is a category I like to use on ones where I don't like to just throw it away, but where I'm not sure that I would say it's a tornado or not. But this storm near Piedmont, if you look at right there, you can see an area where a tornado could be expected to be produced. However, it did not look strong enough or tight enough for me to even say that would be tornado possible. The biggest threat of the day that I would see was, funny enough, the last storm of the day that I got on just before midnight. This one that was just flying right into Norman and more. And at this point, on the bookend, not only was an extremely dangerous situation, thunderstorm warning issued for 80 to 100 mile per hour winds, but a tornado warning would also be prompted because that bookend vortex would produce an EF1 tornado that would catch, generating power flashes. Some of those blasts are lightning, but some of them are distinctly that glow of a power flash. Now, there was actually 2 tornadoes that were produced by the spin-up, but only one that I was actually able to see any kind of damage documentation of. Now, on May 11th, I was able to get the first of a series of auroras that would be seen throughout this year, setting the stage for what would just be a crazy finish to May. Another moderate risk would present itself, this time with the threat of a derecho in Kansas and a tornado risk associated with that. Yet another particularly dangerous watch would be issued, this time my first PDS severe thunderstorm watch. Near Garden City, me and a couple other friends would be on the beginning of the derecho, when the cells that would make it up were still relatively isolated until they would join up growing upscale. Around this point, I see 2 areas that could be tornado possible. One spin up and one under the rain-free base of the northern storm. After chasing the rear inflow region of the derecho, I decided to let it pass over in position so I could be ready for this day. May 20th in Colorado, another 5% that would actually be upgraded to a 10 hatched later in the day. With the same friends that I chased on May 19th, over near Akron it was quite a party for storm chasers. The first tornado possible of the day being near the southern edge of the rain-free base of this supercell. But this one was quite a tease, for as absolutely astonishing high plains beauty as it decidedly carried with it, one thing that it did not definitively do was produce a tornado. However, after dark, I was just sitting around, and after my chase partners decided to go home, about 5 minutes later, another tornado warning was issued, and I got just all too hypnotized by what looked to be a dusty tornado forming in the distance, coming straight my way. And with that, the dust circulation under the base with a tornado warning, I count that one as another tornado. Now, I could have chased the next day in Iowa, which I still have yet to chase, but for as intense and productive as that day was, I decided to take a couple days off, head to central Oklahoma, visiting the Warren Theater, doing some sightseeing, and buying a used camera, for which this chase on May 23rd would be a fantastic debut for that camera. I think this thing is about to make something crazy happen, something really crazy. It's gonna be a hard right mover. Not just a right mover, but it's gonna make a right turn. We got a storm around here. It's gonna be just insanely photogenic, I'm sure. Look at that, that's a big, mean looking storm. Look at that storm. Look at that inflow. Got Doppler radar right here. And officially, that bull funnel was the first good picture I got of this long tracking tornado. An absolute beast of a storm. It would be the first time I was ever under a PDS tornado warning, and as it pressed onwards, the tornado would transform from the bull funnel that it initially was into being more of a stovepipe. I just decided to post up, let some of the traffic clear, and take in the beauty with a stationary tornado shot. And in this, I actually captured a twin tornado, a little EF0 that tagged along for a couple minutes, satellite to the main tornado. This would also be the first storm that I can remember having a meso-gamma mesoscale discussion that I was chasing. Once that satellite tornado formed with the main one, the tornado decided to go full-on stovepipe and even go into a bit of a sturdy cone shape. Unfortunately, the road options were just too limited, with closures and areas that were just simply not drivable. I drove across this tornado's damage path, and as it occluded to the north, I tried to keep up with it, but it wouldn't take very long before it would finally dissipate. So I decided to just view the damage that it caused and take in the wonder of nature that I had just seen. Now, May 25th was a day that we knew pretty much a few days out that it was going to be a fairly significant severe weather risk. And in fact, it was almost, and if you ask me, probably should have been the second high risk of the year. This day would garner another PDS watch, this time my second PDS tornado watch. However, throughout the day, the evolution of the storms would not be quite as a lot of us were expecting. A lot of left movers were going across central Oklahoma, and the regimes were split between a set of storms in northern Oklahoma traveling east and another set of storms near the Red River. The one that was north of me, I decided, even though the storm could bust, I didn't think it was going to, and that storm would end up being the tornado producer near Claremore. However, it was just far outrunning me and I could not catch up to it. Unfortunately, my concerns about this storm materialized rapidly. Another option that I had been considering a few hours prior was going down to the Red River, but indecision left me helplessly stuck, far from either regime. On June 1st, the official start of summer, I went down back into the desert of Texas, pretty close to New Mexico, and got this absolutely gigantic hail producing 100-mile-per-hour wind, rain wrapped tornado producing monster of a supercell. Right around this point, a rain wrapped tornado was forming inside, but I could not really get a great view, and I was not willing to take giant hailstones to get a better view of it. With those giant hailstones in mind, I got myself out of there pretty fast. On the way back from that setup in Texas, I was traveling, saw some dust devils. Next day, I would end up in the Panhandle seeing a couple storm chasing friends, and on the 8th of June, I would go up into Colorado to chase a 2% setup with an enhanced risk due to wind. But the tornadoes, despite being the lower risk that day, were still the performers, with that little one being another short-lived tornado. Now, after a couple of weeks where I couldn't chase, I finally got back on and went up to Wyoming for my first ever tornado chase in that state. And this storm was very quickly showing just how much vorticity it had to work with. However, while chasing alongside the storm in Wyoming, I made some just dumb decisions about how to manage the chase and ended up behind it while it was producing a beautiful landspout, but while keeping up persistent with it as it raced across the border into Nebraska, I was able to at least catch the second tornado that it produced. Right there you can see the beginning of an EF1 tornado that would last for several miles. Not quite as good as if I had caught the one in Wyoming. I would prefer to have seen both, but at least getting something that day. It was nice consolation. On July 1st, I would end up back in Nebraska for another severe weather risk, this time being a 5% tornado chance. And just wow, were these storms photogenic. They had a weird form as just a continual merging of showers along a warm front until around this point you can see a dominant supercell really gathered some spin and took over as the tail end Charlie along that frontal boundary. Getting a little bit closer to it, I took my chance to see if this thing would finally produce a beautiful, highly visible tornado, but it just kept on teasing us. Decided to just go straight to the rain-free base and see if on the next cycle it would produce a tornado. And it actually did. In these photos, you can see a tiny, unrated tornado that I would just be lucky enough to catch out of the corner of my eye. A couple of days later, in Colorado, I would be working with a 2% tornado risk area. This storm would prompt a tornado warning, probably associated with landspout tornado potential. I never saw anything on that one. However, this storm, about an hour later, further south, would produce a possible tornado that I couldn't confirm, but with the RFD cut and lowering, it looked like it really could have been a tornado. As the storm was dying, it looked even more like it could have been a tornado, but it never produced one at this point. On July 7th, I was actually working with a 0% tornado risk. However, if you look at the severe thunderstorm watch that they issued that day, a couple tornadoes possible was mentioned as a hazard, which should have been associated with a 2% tornado risk. Nonetheless, I had a nice little sneaky tornado chance kind of day. And this storm that I was following close to Colorado Springs would produce a possible tornado. I got close and it was a real ground scraping wall cloud of a storm producing that. But was it producing a tornado? I just was not sure. It would be a month before I was on another setup that really had a chance of producing a tornado. This day did not have, as far as I can recall, an official tornado risk associated with it, but it was a slight risk day, and with some special boundary interactions, this kind of loosely defined hail producing storm would suddenly consolidate. As right around here, you can see the RFD racing out ahead and producing a hook and prompting a tornado warning. I would get pretty close to the storm from a couple different angles, but I can't say that at any point I actually saw a tornado, even though it seemed like it got really close and so many plumes of dust screamed possible tornado. On August 11th, I would get one of my most memorable chases of the year, a 2% tornado risk in the northeastern corridor of the Colorado Plains. And this area is very favored for tornadic supercells. And I decided to just go straight in, getting as close as I could to this unexpectedly fast-moving supercell. This storm was at some times moving 50 miles per hour, which is easily the fastest I've ever seen a supercell move in Colorado. Nonetheless, keeping up with it, it was around this time that I saw what I was pretty sure was a tornado, and upon looking closer and seeing angles from other people's video, I'm counting this one as a tornado. As the storm was getting closer to the Nebraska and Kansas borders, it actually got another tornado reported on it, and I tried to outrace it, which was kind of a dumb decision, but in doing so, I was able to get a good sample of the wind field and see something of a wind shift, so I'm willing to bet that that report of a tornado was accurate.
We got strong winds blasting through here.
Trailing behind, the storm was just barely skirting the border, and it wouldn't be long before I'd end up in Kansas. But just before ending up in Kansas, I would see what I would call a pretty well-defined funnel reaching up towards the ground.
That could be a tornado right there. That looks like one to me right there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And with that, I'm counting it another tornado. After that chase, I would end up seeing another beautiful aurora display. On August 12th, a setup with only a marginal risk being driven by hail, with no associated tornado potential being spoken of by the SPC, ended up being another one of the most memorable chases that I had this year. Up near Brush, Colorado, I would get on this storm that was just spitting out wall cloud after wall cloud, and I was waiting for at some point or another that it would finally produce a tornado. I was really waiting for this thing to just plant a big cone or a thin little stovepipe or something. Well, around this time, the RFD would wrap back around yet again, and getting closer, I got a pretty good idea of what I was looking at and the wind field that this thing was consolidating into. A tornado warning would be issued, and I was one of very few people on it. This set of photos that I got with the Canon, I'm willing to declare that it bird farted. A little short-lived, weak tornado, but bird fart tornadoes are still tornadoes, just like landspouts. I chased again on August 13th, another 2% tornado risk in the eastern Colorado Plains. This was mostly an MCS risk, but with the nocturnal lower level jet being supportive of tornado potential, QLCS spin-ups were forecasted as a possible threat later in the night. I got to the gust front at this point, and this section of the QLCS was warned. I saw some dust rotating underneath the front, but I can't say for sure it was a tornado, just possibly a tornado. On August 19th, there was actually a special weather statement made for the possibility of a landspout pretty close to where my family lives and where I was staying in Colorado. And this storm complex just north of I-70 would be just a classic textbook Denver convergence vorticity zone spawned landspout tornado producer. If I had just been a couple minutes quicker, I might have gotten a really good shot of this landspout tornado. However, I still got it just barely on camera. But landspouts are tornadoes too, and you can add that to the count. Another very memorable day was August 22nd, which had a 3% NATOcast outline, but no official tornado risk from the SPC. However, I was willing to give the NATOcast the go-ahead with guiding my forecasting and chase that day. And it was around this point that you can see the dust circulating under the base as the start of a landspout tornado. Just popping up from a boundary, this storm was feeding very easily on a lot of vorticity and instability, pretty close to the border of Colorado and Kansas. Now at this time, with just how vigorously rotating this thing was and all the dust circulating underneath it, I'm calling it tornado possible. Not that it necessarily was, but that really looked like it in the moment, especially to me. And here, I looked straight up and saw this twisting funnel. And once I looked out further east, saw this dust plume right underneath it. This storm complex was fantastically beautiful, and it was a pretty nice end to meteorological summer. However, this storm would not be the last of the year. There is a second season, of course. Now on September 21st, I would end up back in New Mexico on my first tornado chase of the year in New Mexico. Yep, it took all the way until September for me to get on a tornado threat in New Mexico. And it was a pretty fun experience for my first of the year in the state. This storm had a tornado possible warning on it, but at no point did I see that it was really likely to produce a tornado. This storm was just so beautiful with the sun rays around it and the scenery of eastern New Mexico. I can't help but include it in the video. Now after it died, I was not ready to give up on the chase. And so I continued back east over the border into Texas. And just trying my best to not slide off the road, I was able to discover the storm that would do exactly what I was hoping for.
Right here underneath speaking of lightning, that's something that I'm concerned about right now. So as you see that whole shot out.
As close as this storm was getting to making a tornado, at no point in this set of shots did I ever see what I would officially describe as tornado, or even a possible tornado. However, maybe 15 minutes later, the storm would merge with a new updraft, and it wouldn't take long before I saw something that I would consider possibly a tornado. When I was on a trip to see the Steelers in Pittsburgh, I was actually in a 2% tornado risk, and the game was delayed for almost 2 hours because of it. In October, par for the course in 2024, more astronomical objects would bless my eyes with their beauty, like that comet and these auroras, which I was able to also photo and video document. The time lapses I got of this aurora made it easily the best viewing experience that I got of any aurora in 2024. Viewing these in Colorado was a great experience, but after they were done, I would go back down to New Mexico for the start of the real second severe season. For as small as this supercell was, and the lack of a tornado warning notwithstanding, this storm was a very good tornado producer. In case you missed it on that last view, this storm made a very, very brief tornado right there. You can add that one to the count. And just a couple minutes later, while I was getting ready to chase back on this one as it moved north, it produced another tornado visible on this time lapse. As I was heading north to get away from the storm, thinking it was about to collapse and be done with, I actually turned back and got some shots of another tornado. Add that one to the count, and this supercell would actually end up being one of the more prolific tornado producers that I saw all year, despite them all being very short-lived, weak tornadoes. On November 2nd, I would be back on the chase, this time my first ever ride-along chase. It was round 1 of a multi-round day. This frontal boundary, pushing through Lubbock, brought an associated QLCS tornado threat, with this rotation but no tornadoes observed. And getting back into Lubbock, it was some pretty heavy flooding noted. For the rest of the day, I would be back in my vehicle, and though we were in Texas and expecting to stay in Texas, the storms actually were a lot further west than we were expecting them to be. We would end up in New Mexico, well across the border, for what would be the final New Mexico chase of the year, with a real tornado threat.
We might have a tornado on the ground in that big messed up supercell. That's a nice RFD cut, nice striations. The hook on radar is looking beautiful. This thing might be doing damn with perfect form. Oh man, I hope that doesn't hit oil sensor directly. That's on the ground. That's a tornado. certain this thing is tornadic right now. Entering the bear's cage.
Before I even knew it myself, my camera captured a tornado emerging from the RFD and revealing itself in this shot. On another shot in this time lapse, you can very clearly see that tornado. And in this, I actually got to see my first ever tornado rope out. New Mexico was performing a lot higher this day than pretty much any of us would have expected. So I kept close along with this storm, hoping that it would cycle, maybe produce another tornado. Now, funny enough, one of the smallest tornado warnings ever issued was this one for the storm that I was on. But as it pressed onwards towards Hobbs and prompted tornado sirens, it became clear that this storm was slowly dying, and if there was going to be any more action that day, it would be from another storm or another set of storms. Round 3 that day pressed into the late night as a QLCS tornado threat manifested, and I saw, while staying along with the gust front near some mesovortices, what I could consider may have been a possible QLCS tornado. But, again, I'm not confident enough in it to officially say that it was a tornado. So, that one will just be a tornado possible. My final chase of the year would be on November 3rd in southeast Oklahoma with a 10% tornado risk. I would start the day closer to Childress, Texas, and you can pretty quickly get an idea of just how rainy and messy these storms would be based off of some of the shots and the radar. I got into one of these tornado warnings as I pressed onwards across I-35 into southeast Oklahoma. Getting closer and closer, I could feel the winds changing and just had to go with some instinct to get a really good feel of exactly where the heck I was.
Watching out for a potential tornado in this area. The wind's whipping across the road. Those are northwesterlies. We're near the rear inflow region of this. Yeah, we're not far away from it at all. We're pretty damn close. Here's a tornado is going to be within the next couple miles of going this way.
Unfortunately, the final tornado of the year was not one that I really got a good view of, but one that was almost more documented by how it felt rather than what it looked like. Because I was inside of the rear inflow jet, you could see the winds feeding into it, and it definitely shook the car, but I never got any good views of any big photogenic tornadoes. 2024 was absolutely a highly prolific year for tornadoes in the United States, one of the highest all time. And given that it was my second year as a storm chaser, It was a nice year for me to improve upon the progress that I had made in my rookie year in 2023. In my rookie year of 2023, I didn't even get double-digit tornadoes, but in 2024, I got 27 tornadoes observed, with an additional 10 tornadoes possible, these being ones that you could say maybe or maybe not. Wouldn't discount them entirely, but I wouldn't say that they were for sure. But 27 tornadoes that I am sure about is a significant improvement over the year before, and yet still just a tiny sample of the amount of tornadoes that took place in 2024. Here's to hoping that in 2025 I can continue to grow upon the progress that I have set. Thanks everybody for watching.